She confessed that she was a virgin at 28, but her millionaire boss heard her and became obsessed. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. She shouldn't have said it out loud, but she did. The afternoon sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Tech Vision Industries, casting golden streaks across the polished marble floors of the 42nd floor. Michelle Torres adjusted her navy blazer as she walked through the bustling hallway, her heels clicking softly against the cold surface. At 28, she moved with quiet confidence through the corporate maze, her rich brown skin glowing under the office lights, her natural hair pulled back in a neat low bun that framed her delicate features perfectly. She had been working at Tech Vision for 2 years now, and while she was respected for her efficiency and gentle professionalism, Michelle had always preferred to blend into the background. No office drama, no romantic entanglements, no complications. "Michelle, wait up." The familiar voice belonged to Jessica, her closest friend at the company, a bubbly marketing coordinator with an infectious laugh and an unfortunate tendency to pry into everyone's personal life. "Hey, Jess." Michelle turned, offering her signature warm smile that always made people feel at ease. "Ready for lunch?" "More than ready. I'm starving, and I have so much to tell you about my disaster of a date last night." Jessica linked their arms as they headed toward the company cafe. "But first, I want to hear about your weekend. Please tell me you finally went out with that guy from the gym." Michelle's cheeks warmed slightly. "No, I told you already. I'm just not interested." The cafe buzzed with the typical lunch rush. Employees grabbing quick salads, heated conversations about quarterly reports, and the occasional burst of laughter from the corner tables. Michelle chose a quiet spot near the large windows, far from the main crowd, where she could see the city sprawling below them. Jessica ordered her usual turkey wrap, while Michelle settled for a simple garden salad. As they sat down, Jessica leaned forward, with the determination of someone about to conduct an interrogation. "Okay, seriously. You're 28, gorgeous, smart, and you've been single for as long as I've known you. What's really going on?" Michelle shifted uncomfortably, picking at her salad. The question hung in the air between them like an unwelcome guest. She glanced around the cafe, making sure no one was listening. The nearest table was occupied by 2 accountants deep in discussion about spreadsheets, and behind them, she could see the frosted glass partition that separated the cafe from the executive conference room. "It's complicated, Jess." "Complicated how? Are you still hung up on someone from college? Are you secretly married? Are you—" "I'm a virgin." The words slipped out in barely a whisper, so quiet that Michelle immediately regretted them. Jessica's eyes widened, and for a moment, the chatter around them seemed to fade into background noise. "Wait, what?" Michelle's heart raced. She shouldn't have said it. She never talked about this with anyone. But something about Jessica's persistence and the safety of their hidden corner had loosened her tongue. "I've never been with anyone. Romantically. Physically." Her voice was soft, vulnerable in a way that made her want to disappear. "I know it's weird at my age, but I want it to mean something, you know? I want to wait for someone who really loves me, not just someone who wants to—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Jessica reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Michelle, that's not weird at all. That's actually beautiful. Is it? Sometimes I feel like I'm living in a different world than everyone else, like I'm some kind of fossil from another era." "You're not a fossil. You're just authentic. In a world full of people who throw themselves at anything that moves, you're waiting for something real." Michelle felt tears prick at the corner of her eyes. "I just want someone to love me for who I am, not for what I can give them. Someone who sees me, really sees me, and still wants to stay." Behind the frosted glass partition, a figure had gone completely still. Ragnar Carter, 36 years old and CEO of Tech Vision Industries, had been reviewing quarterly projections when their conversation drifted through the thin partition. He was a man who commanded boardrooms with the same ease that others commanded their morning coffee. 6 feet 3 inches of controlled power, with dark blonde hair perfectly styled, piercing blue eyes that missed nothing, and the kind of presence that made investors write checks without reading the fine print. He had been about to leave when he heard Michelle's voice, that soft, melodic tone he'd noticed in the few meetings where she'd taken notes for his assistant. But now, hearing her confession, something inside his chest tightened in a way he couldn't explain. "I want to wait for someone who really loves me." The words echoed in his mind as he stood frozen behind the glass, his hand gripping the edge of the conference table. He had built an empire through calculation and control, surrounding himself with people who wanted something from him: money, status, access to power. But this woman, this gentle soul who worked just 3 floors below his office, wanted something he'd never thought to offer anyone. She wanted to be truly loved. Ragnar's jaw clenched as an unfamiliar sensation coursed through him. It wasn't just attraction, though Michelle's natural beauty had caught his attention during those brief encounters in elevators and hallways. This was something deeper, more dangerous. It was curiosity, mixed with an inexplicable need to protect something precious. "I should go," Michelle was saying, standing up from her table. "I have that budget report to finish before 5. Jessica gathered her things, still chattering about weekend plans and yoga classes, but Ragnar couldn't focus on anything except the way Michelle moved, graceful and unhurried, as if she carried music in her steps. He waited until they were gone before emerging from the conference room, his mind racing with thoughts he couldn't categorize. In the span of 5 minutes, everything had shifted. The woman he'd barely noticed before had become the center of a storm he didn't understand. As he walked back to his office, Ragnar couldn't shake the image of Michelle's earnest brown eyes or the vulnerability in her voice when she spoke about love. He had conquered markets, bought companies, and built wealth beyond imagination. But this was uncharted territory. Back at her desk on the 29th floor, Michelle tried to focus on her budget spreadsheets, but her mind kept drifting to her conversation with Jessica. She felt exposed, as if she'd revealed too much of herself in the safety of what she thought was privacy. She touched her neck absently, a nervous habit she'd had since childhood, and took a deep breath. Tomorrow would be better. Tomorrow she would go back to being invisible Michelle Torres, the efficient assistant who never caused waves. She had no idea that 3 floors above her, a powerful man was staring out his corner office window, unable to concentrate on anything except the sound of her voice saying she wanted to be truly loved. And in that moment, everything changed, though neither of them knew it yet. He told himself it was just curiosity, but his hands were shaking. The morning arrived gray and unwelcoming, Chicago's skyline wrapped in a blanket of clouds that seemed to mirror Ragnar's restless mood. He had spent the entire night staring at his ceiling, replaying Michelle's words until they became a mantra he couldn't escape. "I want someone who really loves me." By 6 a.m., he was already in his office, nursing his 3rd cup of black coffee and pretending to review merger documents. But every few minutes his eyes drifted to the elevator bank, visible through his glass walls, waiting for a glimpse of brown skin and gentle movements. He felt ridiculous. Ragnar Carter didn't wait for anyone. People waited for him. CEOs of Fortune 500 companies called him for advice. Investment firms courted his business. Models and socialites threw themselves at his feet. Yet here he was, a grown man reduced to watching elevators like a lovesick teenager. The soft chime of the elevator made his pulse quicken, but it was only Davidson from accounting, carrying his usual stack of manila folders and wearing the perpetually stressed expression of someone who lived in spreadsheets. "Get it together," Ragnar told himself, forcing his attention back to the documents. "She's just an employee." But even as he tried to convince himself, he knew it was a lie. Michelle Torres had become something much more dangerous than just an employee. She had become an obsession he couldn't rationalize away. 3 floors below, Michelle stepped out of the elevator at exactly 8:47 a.m., just as she had every day for the past 2 years. She wore a soft cream blouse that complemented her rich skin tone and a charcoal pencil skirt that was professional but never drew unwanted attention. Her natural hair was styled in loose curls today, framing her face in a way that made her look younger, more approachable. "Morning, Michelle," called Janet from reception, waving her usual cheerful greeting. "Good morning, Janet. How's little Sophie doing with her piano lessons?" It was such a small exchange, barely worth noticing, but something about Michelle's genuine interest in the receptionist's daughter made Ragnar's chest tighten. She remembered details about people's lives. She cared about things that didn't affect her directly. He watched as she settled into her cubicle, organizing her desk with the same methodical care she brought to everything. A small succulent plant sat next to her computer, nothing flashy, just a touch of life in the sterile corporate environment. She watered it carefully with a tiny watering can she kept in her drawer, and the simple act struck him as incredibly intimate. "Focus," he commanded himself, but his eyes betrayed him, following her every movement as she began her day. "Sir?" His assistant's voice startled him back to reality. Karen stood in his doorway, holding her tablet and wearing the patient expression of someone who had clearly been trying to get his attention for several minutes. "The Morrison account meeting is in 10 minutes, she said carefully. "Should I reschedule?" "No." Ragnar straightened his tie and forced his mind back to business. "I'll be right there." But even during the meeting, as Morrison Industries presented their quarterly projections, Ragnar found his thoughts drifting. He nodded at appropriate moments, asked strategic questions, and closed a $2 million deal without ever fully engaging. His body was in the boardroom, but his mind was 3 floors down, wondering what Michelle had for lunch. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He was losing his edge. The control that had built his empire was slipping away because of a woman who didn't even know he existed beyond their brief professional encounters. After the meeting, he made a decision that surprised even him. "Karen, I need you to pull the employee files for the administrative staff on the 29th floor for the quarterly performance reviews." Karen raised an eyebrow. "Sir, those reviews aren't due for another 2 months, and typically HR handles. I want to be more hands-on with employee development this quarter." The lie came easily, wrapped in corporate speak that made it sound reasonable. "Start with the Torres file." If Karen found his request odd, she was too professional to comment. Within an hour, Michelle's personnel file sat on his desk like a roadmap to understanding the woman who had captivated him, Michelle Elena Torres. Born in San Antonio, Texas, graduated magna cum laude from University of Illinois with a degree in business administration, 2 years at Tech Vision Industries. Performance reviews, exemplary. No disciplinary actions. Emergency contact, Maria Torres, mother. The bare facts told him nothing about the woman who blushed when complimented, who watered succulents with tiny watering cans, who had never been kissed at 28 because she was waiting for love. That afternoon, Ragnar found himself making excuses to walk past the administrative floor. First, it was a meeting with the HR director that could have been handled via email. Then, a sudden interest in the quarterly budget reports that Michelle's department handled. Each time he caught glimpses of her, the way she tucked a curl behind her ear when concentrating, the soft laugh she shared with Jessica, the graceful way she moved between cubicles when helping colleagues. During his 3rd accidental visit, something unexpected happened. Michelle was reaching for a file on a high shelf, standing on her tiptoes but still unable to reach. Without thinking, Ragnar stepped forward. "Allow me." His voice was deeper than usual, rough around the edges. Michelle turned, startled, and for a moment they were standing impossibly close. He could smell her perfume, something light and floral that reminded him of spring mornings. Her eyes were even more beautiful up close, warm brown with flecks of gold that caught the overhead lights. "Mr. Carter." She stepped back quickly, clearly flustered. "I didn't see you there. I can get it myself, really. It's no trouble." He reached over her easily, his height making the task simple, but he found himself moving slowly, savoring the proximity. His hand brushed hers as he handed her the file, and the contact sent electricity shooting up his arm. "Thank you," she whispered, and he could see the rapid pulse at her throat, the way her breath had quickened. "Michelle, right?" He knew perfectly well what her name was, but the pretense felt necessary. "Yes, sir. Michelle Torres. I've been working here for 2 years. The words slipped out before he could stop them, revealing far more knowledge than a CEO should have about a mid-level employee. She looked surprised, and he realized his mistake immediately. "I make it a point to know my team," he added quickly, though it sounded weak even to his own ears. "That's very thoughtful of you, sir." They stood there for a moment longer than was professionally appropriate, and Ragnar felt something shift in the space between them. Michelle's cheeks were flushed, her breathing shallow, and he recognized the signs of attraction, even as she tried to hide them. "Well," she said finally, clutching the file against her chest like a shield, "I should get back to work." "Of course." He stepped aside to let her pass, but as she walked away, he called out softly, "Michelle?" She turned back, her expression questioning. "Good work on the Henderson report. Very thorough." The smile that lit up her face was worth every ethical boundary he was crossing. "Thank you, Mr. Carter. That means a lot." As she disappeared around the corner, Ragnar stood alone in the hallway, his heart pounding like he'd just run a marathon. The brief encounter had only made things worse. Now he knew what her skin felt like against his, knew the way her eyes sparkled when she was pleased, knew the exact shade of pink her cheeks turned when she was nervous. Back at her desk, Michelle tried to focus on her work, but her hands were trembling slightly as she opened the file. The CEO of the company, the CEO, had not only helped her reach something, but he'd known her name, known her work, complimented her performance. And for just a moment, when he'd handed her the file and their hands had touched, she'd felt something electric pass between them, something that made her stomach flutter and her skin warm in ways she'd never experienced before. She touched her cheek, still feeling the heat there, and tried to convince herself she was imagining things. Men like Ragnar Carter didn't notice women like her. He was probably just being professional, maybe trying to connect with his employees. But the way he'd said her name, low and careful like he was tasting it, that hadn't felt professional at all. 3 floors up, Ragnar was standing at his window again, but this time he wasn't staring blindly at the city. This time he was making plans. The observation phase was over. It was time to get closer. She said yes before she could stop herself, and he smiled like he'd won the lottery. The following Tuesday arrived with an unusual energy crackling through the Tech Vision building. Michelle felt it the moment she stepped off the elevator, a subtle shift in the atmosphere that she couldn't quite identify. Maybe it was the way the security guard smiled a little too widely, or how Janet at reception seemed to be watching her with curious eyes. She brushed off the feeling and settled into her morning routine, checking emails, organizing her schedule, watering her little succulent with the same care she gave everything in her life. But today even the simple tasks felt different, charged with anticipation she couldn't explain. At 10:23 a.m., Karen Rodriguez appeared at her cubicle, impeccably dressed and carrying herself with the confidence that came from being the CEO's right hand. "Michelle Torres?" Karen's voice was professional but warm. "Mr. Carter would like to see you in his office." The words hit Michelle like a cold wave. Her stomach dropped, and she immediately began running through every possible mistake she might have made. The Henderson report. Had she missed something critical? Was she being fired? Did he say what it was about? Michelle's voice came out smaller than she intended. "He didn't specify, but don't worry, you're not in trouble." Karen's smile was reassuring, though Michelle noticed she didn't quite meet her eyes. "He's been reviewing employee development opportunities." The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt endless. Michelle checked her reflection in the polished steel doors, smoothing her burgundy blouse and making sure her hair was still neat. She had chosen the outfit carefully this morning without really knowing why. It brought out the warmth in her skin and made her feel confident, which she desperately needed right now. The executive floor was a different world from her usual workspace. Everything here spoke of power and success. Rich mahogany panels, original artwork, floor-to-ceiling windows that offered commanding views of Chicago's skyline. Michelle had only been up here twice before, both times to deliver urgent documents, and she'd never stayed longer than necessary. "Mr. Carter will see you now," Karen said, gesturing toward the corner office with double doors that seemed impossibly intimidating. Michelle knocked softly and heard his voice, that deep, commanding tone that made her pulse quicken, telling her to enter. Ragnar's office was exactly what she'd expected, massive, elegant, and designed to impress. But what she hadn't expected was the way he looked when he saw her. His usual composed expression flickered for just a moment, revealing something warmer, more personal, before the professional mask slipped back into place. "Michelle, thank you for coming up." He stood from behind his desk, and she was struck again by his imposing presence. Today he wore a charcoal grey suit that fit him perfectly, emphasizing his broad shoulders and tall frame. His blue eyes seemed more intense than she remembered, and when he smiled, actually smiled, not just the polite expression he wore in meetings, her knees felt weak. "Of course, Mr. Carter." Karen mentioned something about employee development. "Please, sit." He gestured to one of the leather chairs in front of his desk, but instead of returning to his own seat, he leaned against the desk's edge, bringing him closer to her level. The casual pose was disarming, making the vast office feel suddenly more intimate. "I've been reviewing your work and I'm impressed, very impressed." His voice carried genuine warmth that made her cheeks heat up. "Your attention to detail, your ability to anticipate needs, the way you interact with your colleagues, it's exactly the kind of leadership potential we value here." Michelle blinked, certain she'd misheard. "Leadership potential. I'd like to offer you an opportunity to work more closely with the executive team, starting with a special project that would report directly to me." The words hung in the air between them, and Michelle felt her world tilting slightly off its axis. A promotion? Working directly with him? It was everything she'd dreamed of professionally, but something in his tone, in the way he was looking at her, suggested this was about more than just business. That's incredibly generous, but I'm not sure I'm qualified for... You are! He said it with such conviction that she almost believed him. The question is whether you're interested. She studied his face, searching for clues about what this really meant. His expression was carefully controlled, but she could see something burning behind those blue eyes, an intensity that made her skin tingle and her breath catch. What kind of project? Market research for our expansion into emerging technologies, building on the success of your preliminary work on the Austin market analysis. It would require some travel, evening meetings, close collaboration with me personally. Each word seemed deliberately chosen, loaded with meaning she wasn't sure she was brave enough to interpret. Travel? Nothing too extensive. Maybe a weekend trip to San Francisco next month, a conference in Denver the month after. All expenses paid, of course, and a significant salary increase to reflect your new responsibilities. Michelle's mind raced. The professional opportunity was incredible, but the personal implications terrified her. She could feel the pull between them, the electric tension that made every interaction feel dangerous and thrilling. Working closely with him would be playing with fire, and she'd never been the kind of woman who took those risks. Can I think about it? Of course. He stood and walked to his window, hands clasped behind his back. Take all the time you need. But Michelle... Yes? He turned back to her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. I hope you'll say yes. I think we could accomplish great things together. The way he said together sent a shiver down her spine. She stood quickly, needing to escape before she made a decision that could change everything. Thank you for considering me, Mr. Carter. I'll let you know soon. Ragnar. I'm sorry. When it's just us, call me Ragnar. We'll be working closely together after all. His smile was devastating, the kind that probably made million-dollar deals close themselves. If you take the position. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and headed toward the door. But before she could escape, he spoke again. Actually, Michelle, would you join me for coffee this afternoon? Around 3? I'd like to discuss some of the project details. Coffee. Just coffee. The rational part of her mind tried to convince her it was innocent, professional, but the way her heart was racing suggested otherwise. Yes, that would be fine. Excellent. There's a cafe across the street. Grounded. Do you know it? She nodded. She'd walked past it dozens of times but never gone in. It looked like the kind of place where important people made important decisions, all exposed brick and artisanal everything. 3 o'clock then. I'm looking forward to it. The elevator ride back to her floor passed in a blur. Michelle felt like she was floating, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. When she reached her desk, Jessica immediately pounced. What was that about? You look like you've seen a ghost or won the lottery, I can't tell which. He offered me a promotion, a big one. That's amazing. Wait, why do you look like you're about to throw up? Michelle sank into her chair, her legs suddenly unsteady. Because I think he might be interested in me, as more than just an employee. Jessica's eyes widened. The CEO, our CEO, the gorgeous, mysterious, probably worth more than a small country CEO? Keep your voice down, Michelle hissed, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. Oh my God, Michelle, this is huge. What are you going to do? I don't know. We're having coffee at 3 to discuss the project details. She made air quotes, her stomach churning with nervous energy. And I have no idea what I'm doing. Jessica, you know I've never even been on a real date. What if I'm completely misreading this? What if it really is just professional? Honey, look at me. Jessica grabbed her hands, forcing eye contact. Trust your instincts. If your gut is telling you there's something more here, then there probably is. The question is, what do you want? That was the terrifying part. For the first time in her life, Michelle wanted something that scared her. She wanted to take the risk, to see where this dangerous attraction might lead. She wanted to find out what it would feel like to be desired by a man like Ragnar Carter. I want to feel brave, she whispered. Then be brave. At exactly 3 o'clock, Michelle stood outside grounded, smoothing her skirt and trying to calm her racing heart. Through the large windows, she could see Ragnar already seated at a corner table, checking his phone. He'd removed his suit jacket, and his white shirt was rolled up at the sleeves, revealing strong forearms that made her stomach flutter. The moment she walked in, his head lifted as if he'd sensed her presence. Their eyes met across the cafe, and the smile that spread across his face was so genuine, so warm, that she forgot to be nervous. He stood as she approached, pulling out her chair like they were on a real date instead of having a business meeting. The gesture was old-fashioned and sweet, and it made her feel special in a way she'd never experienced. You came, he said softly, and there was relief in his voice that made her wonder if he'd been as nervous as she was. You thought I wouldn't? I hoped you would, but I wasn't sure. He signaled the waitress, who appeared instantly with the kind of attentive service that money and power commanded. What would you like? Just a latte, please. Vanilla, if they have it. Make that too, Ragnar told the waitress, then turned his full attention back to Michelle. So what do you think of the offer? For the next hour they talked about work, about the project, about her career goals, and his vision for the company. But underneath the professional conversation, something else was happening. Their knees brushed under the small table. He laughed at her jokes, really laughed, not the polite chuckle she was used to from colleagues. When she got excited about an idea, gesturing with her hands as she spoke, he watched her with an intensity that made her skin warm. You have beautiful hands, he said suddenly, interrupting her explanation about market demographic analysis. The comment hung between them, too personal for a business meeting, too intimate to ignore. Thank you, she managed, suddenly self-conscious. I'm sorry. That was inappropriate, but he didn't look sorry. He looked like a man who'd finally said something he'd been thinking for a long time. It's okay. And somehow, it was. Coming from him, the compliment felt natural, honest. Michelle. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to that low, intimate tone that made her pulse race. I want to be honest with you about something. Her heart stopped. Okay. This position, it's real. The work is legitimate, and you're absolutely qualified. But I'd be lying if I said that was the only reason I'm offering it to you. The confession hung in the air between them, like a bridge she could either cross or burn down. Everything in her safe, careful world told her to run, to thank him politely, and return to her desk where things made sense. Instead, she heard herself asking, what's the other reason? His blue eyes searched her face, looking for permission to continue. Because I can't stop thinking about you. Because every time I see you in the hallway, I have to fight the urge to find an excuse to talk to you. Because you're beautiful and kind and real in a way that makes everyone else seem like they're playing a part. The words washed over her like warm water, dissolving every careful defense she'd built. Ragnar, I know this is complicated. I know there are rules about relationships between supervisors and employees. I know you probably think I'm some kind of predator who... I don't think that. The words came out stronger than she felt. I think I feel it too. Something shifted in his expression. Relief mixed with hunger, mixed with something that looked like wonder. You do? She nodded, not trusting her voice. The admission felt like stepping off a cliff, terrifying and liberating at the same time. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his, the simple contact sending electricity shooting up her arm. Then say yes. To the job, to spending more time together, to seeing where this goes. Looking into his eyes, seeing the vulnerability behind his confidence, Michelle made a choice that would change everything. Yes. And just like that, her carefully ordered world began to beautifully unravel. She was supposed to be reviewing market data, but all she could think about was the way he said her name. 3 weeks into her new position, Michelle had discovered that working closely with Ragnar Carter was both a dream and a sweet kind of torture. The project was everything he'd promised, challenging, engaging, and career-defining. But the man himself was proving to be far more complex and captivating than she'd ever imagined. It was 7:30 p.m. on a Thursday, and the executive floor had emptied hours ago. The cleaning crew had finished their rounds, leaving behind the faint scent of lemon polish and the kind of silence that only existed in empty office buildings. Michelle sat in the small conference room adjacent to Ragnar's office, surrounded by market research reports and demographic charts, her laptop screen casting a blue glow across her concentrated features. She had been working in this space for the past week, and it had quickly become her favorite place in the building. The room had floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of Chicago's evening skyline, and Ragnar had made sure she had everything she needed: a comfortable ergonomic chair, a high-end computer, even fresh flowers that appeared mysteriously on the table every Monday morning. You're still here. His voice made her look up from the spreadsheet she'd been analyzing. Ragnar stood in the doorway, having shed his suit jacket and tie sometime during the day. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal those strong forearms that had been featuring prominently in her increasingly vivid dreams. So are you, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady despite the way her heart had started racing at the sight of him. I had a conference call with Tokyo, different time zones. He moved into the room, bringing with him the subtle scent of his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her want to breathe deeper. "What's your excuse?" Michelle gestured at the papers spread across the table. "The Denver market demographics are more complex than we initially thought. There are some interesting patterns emerging in the 25 to 35 age bracket that could affect our expansion strategy." She launched into an explanation of her findings, her enthusiasm for the work overriding her nervousness about being alone with him. As she spoke, pointing out trends and outliers in the data, she noticed the way he was listening, not just to her words, but to her, as if everything she said mattered deeply to him. "You're brilliant," he said quietly when she finished, and the sincerity in his voice made her cheeks warm. "I'm just doing my job." "No, you're exceeding every expectation I had, and my expectations were already high." He moved closer, coming to stand beside her chair to look at the data she'd been analyzing. "Show me this pattern you identified." Michelle tried to focus on the spreadsheet, but having him so close was making it impossible to think clearly. She could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could smell that intoxicating cologne mixed with something that was purely him. When she reached for her pen to point out a specific data point, his hand covered hers. "Here," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "You can see how the numbers shift when we factor in household income versus education level." But neither of them was looking at the data anymore. Ragnar's fingers had intertwined with hers, and the simple contact was sending electricity shooting up her arm. She turned to look at him, and found his blue eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Michelle," he said softly, and her name sounded different in his voice, like a prayer, like a promise. "We shouldn't," she started, but she didn't pull her hand away. "Probably not," he agreed, but he didn't move either. "But I can't seem to help myself around you." The confession hung between them, honest and vulnerable. Michelle felt like she was standing at the edge of a precipice, knowing that one step forward would change everything, but unable to resist the pull. "I think about you," she admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "More than I should, more than is professional." Something shifted in his expression, surprise mixed with relief, mixed with desire so intense it made her stomach flip. "What do you think about?" His voice was rough, lower than usual. Michelle felt her cheeks burn, but she held his gaze. "I think about what it would feel like if you kissed me." The admission seemed to break something loose in him. His free hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw with devastating gentleness. "I've been thinking about that too," he murmured. "Every day since that first conversation in the cafe. Every time you smile at me, every time you bite your lip when you're concentrating, every time you say my name." She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed. "Ragnar, I want to kiss you, Michelle. I want it so much it's driving me crazy, but I need to know you want it too." She opened her eyes and found him watching her with an expression so tender it made her heart ache. This powerful man who commanded boardrooms and closed million-dollar deals was asking for her permission, treating her choice as the most important thing in the world. "I want it too," she whispered. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her skin. "Are you sure? Because once we cross this line, there's no going back." Instead of answering with words, Michelle rose from her chair, closing the distance between them. Standing, she was closer to his height, though he still towered over her. She reached up and touched his face, marveling at the rough texture of his 5 o'clock shadow, the warmth of his skin. "I'm sure," she said, and then he was kissing her. It was nothing like the passionate, overwhelming kisses she'd seen in movies. It was soft and careful, and achingly sweet. His lips moved against hers with gentle precision, as if he was memorizing the taste and feel of her. When her lips parted slightly, he deepened the kiss just a fraction, his tongue barely touching hers before pulling back. When they broke apart, Michelle felt dizzy. Her first kiss, at 28 years old, and it had been everything she'd dreamed of and more. "That was," she started, then stopped, unable to find words adequate for what she was feeling. "Perfect," he finished, resting his forehead against hers. "You're perfect." They stood there for a long moment, breathing the same air, neither wanting to break the spell. Finally, Ragnar pulled back slightly, his hand still framing her face. "We should probably talk about what this means," he said reluctantly. Michelle nodded, though talking was the last thing she wanted to do. "Probably, but not tonight." He pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. "Tonight, I just want to hold on to this moment. What happens tomorrow? Tomorrow, we figure out how to navigate this without compromising your career or putting you in an uncomfortable position." His thumbs traced circles on her cheeks. "I won't let anything happen to you because of this, Michelle. I promise." The sincerity in his voice made her believe him. "And if people find out? Then we'll deal with it together. But for now, this is just between us." Michelle felt a thrill run through her at the words "together" and "us." She had never been part of an "us" before, had never had someone want to protect her the way Ragnar clearly did. "I should go," she said, though she made no move to step away from him. "You should," he agreed, but his hands were still holding her face like she was something precious he couldn't bear to release. Finally, with tremendous effort, they separated. Michelle gathered her things while Ragnar watched, both of them moving carefully around each other like they were made of spun glass. "Michelle?" he called as she reached the door. "Yes? Thank you. For what? For taking the chance. For trusting me. For being brave enough to say yes." The elevator ride to the parking garage felt surreal. Michelle touched her lips, still able to feel the lingering warmth of his kiss. Her phone buzzed with a text message, and her heart skipped when she saw his name. "Drive safely, sleep well. I'll see you tomorrow." She typed back quickly. "Thank you for tonight. See you tomorrow." His response came immediately. "I'm already counting the minutes." As Michelle drove home through the quiet Chicago streets, she felt like she was floating. Her carefully ordered world had shifted completely off its axis, but instead of feeling scared, she felt alive in a way she never had before. Back in his office, Ragnar stood at the window watching the city lights, one hand pressed against the glass. He could still taste her on his lips, could still feel the softness of her skin under his fingers. He had kissed countless women before, but none of them had ever affected him the way Michelle's simple, sweet response had. She was going to ruin him, he realized. This gentle, authentic woman, who blushed when he complimented her and kissed like it was a sacred act, was going to completely destroy his carefully constructed walls, and he couldn't wait to let her. They were supposed to be professional at work, but the way he looked at her made her forget how to breathe. The morning after their first kiss, Michelle arrived at work 30 minutes early, her stomach a tangle of nerves and anticipation. She had barely slept, replaying every moment of the previous evening, the gentle pressure of Ragnar's lips, the way he'd held her face like she was something precious, the promise in his voice when he said they'd figure things out together. Now, in the harsh light of day, doubts began creeping in. What if he regretted it? What if last night had been a moment of weakness that he'd want to pretend never happened? What if she had completely misread the situation and made a fool of herself? She tried to focus on organizing her desk, but her eyes kept drifting to the elevator bank, waiting for his arrival. When the familiar chime finally sounded at 8:15 a.m., her heart began racing. Ragnar stepped out looking impeccable as always. Navy suit, crisp white shirt, silver tie that brought out his blue eyes. But when his gaze found hers across the open office space, something passed between them that made Michelle's cheeks warm and her pulse quicken. He didn't smile, that would have been too obvious, but there was a softness in his expression, a barely perceptible acknowledgement of what had changed between them. "Good morning, Michelle," he said as he passed her desk, his voice perfectly professional but carrying an undertone that made her skin tingle. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she replied, proud of how steady her voice sounded, despite the butterflies in her stomach. The rest of the morning passed in a strange dance of normalcy, punctuated by moments of electric tension. During the weekly staff meeting, Ragnar's eyes found hers several times across the conference table, each look lasting just a fraction longer than appropriate. When he asked for her input on the Denver market analysis, his attention was so focused, so intense, that she stumbled over her words. "Excellent work," he said when she finished her presentation, and something in his tone made Jessica shoot her a curious look. After the meeting, as everyone filed out, Ragnar's voice stopped her. "Michelle, could you stay behind for a moment? I have some questions about the demographic breakdown." Jessica raised an eyebrow but said nothing, though Michelle could feel her friend's speculative gaze as she gathered her papers and approached Ragnar's end of the table. When the conference room was empty except for the two of them, the atmosphere immediately shifted. Ragnar waited until the door closed completely before speaking. "How are you feeling about last night?" His voice was quiet, careful. Michelle looked down at her hands, suddenly shy. "I keep thinking I might have dreamed it." "You didn't." He moved closer, stopping just within professional distance, but close enough that she could smell his cologne. "I've been thinking about it all morning. About you." The confession made her look up, and when their eyes met, She saw the same wonder and uncertainty she was feeling reflected in his expression. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. This is all new to me." "We'll figure it out together," he said, echoing his promise from the night before. "But for now, we need to be careful. I don't want anyone to suspect anything until we understand what this is ourselves." Michelle nodded, understanding the necessity even as part of her wanted to shout from the rooftops that Ragnar Carter had kissed her. "Are you free for lunch today?" he asked suddenly. Yes, I think so. There's a place I know, quiet, discreet. We could continue our conversation about the project." The way he said project made it clear they'd be discussing much more than work. "I'd like that." "Good. I'll have Karen make a reservation for 1 o'clock. Meet me in the lobby?" The next few hours crawled by. Michelle tried to concentrate on her work, but every time her phone buzzed with a text message, her heart skipped. Most were work-related, but at 11:30 a message from Ragnar made her breath catch. Counting the minutes until lunch. "You look beautiful today, by the way." She glanced around quickly to make sure no one was watching before typing back, "You can't say things like that at work." His response came immediately. "I can't help myself. That burgundy blouse brings out the gold in your eyes." Michelle touched her collar self-consciously. She had chosen the blouse specifically because it was one of her favorites, but knowing he'd noticed and appreciated, her choice made warmth spread through her chest. "We're supposed to be professional," she texted back. "After hours, I plan to be very unprofessional in my thoughts about you." The message made her face flame. She looked up to find Jessica watching her with undisguised curiosity. "Okay, spill," Jessica whispered, sliding over to perch on the edge of Michelle's desk. "You've been glowing all morning, and you just turned 3 shades of red reading that text. What's going on?" "Nothing," Michelle said quickly, slipping her phone into her drawer. "Just work stuff." "Work stuff doesn't make you blush like that. And I saw the way Mr. Carter was looking at you in the meeting this morning. That was not a professional look. You're imagining things." "Am I? Because I'm pretty sure if he'd stared at you any harder, you would have spontaneously combusted." Before Michelle could respond, Karen appeared at her desk. "Michelle, Mr. Carter asked me to let you know about the lunch meeting. 1 o'clock at Bistro Laurent." Jessica's eyes widened. "Lunch meeting? Just the two of you?" "It's about the Austin project," Michelle said weakly. "Uh-huh." Jessica's grin was knowing. "Well, enjoy your project discussion." Bistro Laurent was exactly the kind of place Michelle had expected. Elegant, intimate, with soft lighting, and tables spaced far enough apart for private conversations. Ragnar was already seated when she arrived, and he stood as the hostess led her to their corner table. "You found it okay?" he asked, pulling out her chair. "GPS is a wonderful thing," she replied, settling into her seat and trying not to notice how the gesture made her feel special, cherished. They ordered, salmon for her, steak for him, and for the first few minutes they actually did discuss work. But gradually the conversation shifted to more personal territory. "Tell me about your family," Ragnar said, cutting into his steak. "You mentioned your mother in your emergency contact information. It's just me and my mum. My dad died when I was 15. The familiar ache accompanied the words, but it was duller now, softened by time. Heart attack. He was only 43. Ragnar's expression grew serious. "I'm sorry, that must have been devastating." "It was, but it also made me and my mom incredibly close. She's my best friend, really. She still lives in San Antonio, and I call her every Sunday." "What does she think about your move to Chicago?" Michelle smiled. "She was terrified at first. I'd never lived anywhere but Texas, and she was convinced I'd freeze to death in my first winter. But she's proud of me. She worked 2 jobs to put me through college, and seeing me succeed, it means everything to her. She sounds like an amazing woman." "She is. What about your family?" Something shifted in Ragnar's expression, becoming more guarded. "It's complicated. My parents are, let's say they're more interested in what I can do for their social standing than who I am as a person. I have a sister, Emma, who's amazing, but she lives in London with her husband. We don't see each other often enough." Michelle sensed there was more to the story, but she didn't push. Instead, she reached across the table and touched his hand, a brief, comforting gesture that seemed to surprise them both with its naturalness. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Family should be a source of support, not stress." Ragnar turned his hand over, catching her fingers before she could pull away. "Your family shaped you into someone kind and grounded. Mine, well, let's just say they taught me to value authenticity when I find it." The way he was looking at her made Michelle's heart race. "Is that what you see in me? Authenticity?" "Among other things." His thumb traced over her knuckles. You don't play games, Michelle. You don't say things you don't mean or pretend to be someone you're not. In my world, that's incredibly rare. Your world. Corporate politics. Social climbing. People who want things from you. You're the first person in years who seems to want to know me, not what I can give them. The vulnerability in his admission made Michelle want to reach across the table and hold him. Instead, she squeezed his hand gently. I do want to know you. The real you, not the CEO version. That might not be a good idea, he said with a rueful smile. The real me is developing some very unprofessional thoughts about you. Michelle felt heat bloom in her cheeks, but she didn't look away. What kind of thoughts? Ragnar's eyes darkened. Thoughts about what it would be like to take you to dinner at a place where we don't have to worry about who might see us. Thoughts about what it would feel like to hold your hand without checking over my shoulder first. Thoughts about kissing you again without the fear that someone might walk in. Each word sent shivers down Michelle's spine. Those don't sound so unprofessional to me. They sound nice. Nice? He smiled, the expression transforming his entire face. I'm trying to seduce you with romantic fantasies, and you think they sound nice? Michelle laughed, the tension breaking into something lighter, but no less intimate. I'm new at this, remember? I don't know the proper responses to seduction attempts. Then let me help you learn, he said, his voice dropping to that low, intimate tone that made her stomach flutter. The proper response to a man telling you he wants to take you to dinner is to tell him you'd like that too. I'd like that too, she repeated obediently, then grinned. How's that? Perfect. And when a man tells you he wants to hold your hand in public, I'd like that too. And when he tells you he can't stop thinking about kissing you, Michelle's breath caught. I'd tell him that I can't stop thinking about it either. The air between them seemed to shimmer with tension. Ragnar's grip on her hand tightened, and for a moment Michelle thought he might lean across the table and kiss her right there in the restaurant. Instead, he raised her hand to his lips and pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles, a gesture so old-fashioned and romantic that it made her heart skip. We should probably head back, he said reluctantly, though he made no move to release her hand. Probably, she agreed, though she was in no hurry to return to the careful distance they had to maintain at the office. As they walked back to the building, Michelle felt like she was floating. The afternoon sun was warm on her face, and Ragnar's presence beside her made everything seem brighter, more vivid. When they reached the lobby, he stopped at the elevator bank. Michelle, yes? Thank you for lunch, for the conversation, for... He paused, searching for words. For being you. Thank you for asking me. The elevator arrived, and they stepped in with two other employees, forcing them back into professional mode. But as they rode up in silence, Michelle caught Ragnar's reflection in the polished steel doors, and the soft smile on his face made her feel like she was keeping the most wonderful secret in the world. Little did she know that someone had been watching them through the restaurant window, and their secret was about to become much more complicated. The photo on her desk changed everything, and not in the way she'd hoped. Michelle was organizing quarterly reports when Jessica burst into her cubicle like a woman on a mission, her usual cheerful expression replaced by something that looked suspiciously like barely contained excitement mixed with concern. We need to talk, Jessica whispered urgently, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. Coffee break, now. Jess, I have this presentation to finish for... Now, Michelle? Jessica's tone brooked no argument. Trust me, this can't wait. 5 minutes later, they were huddled in the far corner of the company cafe, Jessica clutching her phone like it contained state secrets. Michelle's stomach churned with a growing sense of dread. Okay, I'm just going to say this straight out, Jessica began, her voice low. There are rumors. Michelle's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. What kind of rumors? About you and Mr. Carter. Apparently, someone saw you two at Bistro Laurent yesterday, and it definitely didn't look like a business lunch. The blood drained from Michelle's face. Who saw us? That's the thing. I don't know. The rumor is coming from multiple people, but no one will say where it started. But Michelle... Jessica leaned forward, her expression serious. People are talking. They're saying he's been giving you special treatment, that the promotion was questionable. Each word hit Michelle like a physical blow. The beautiful bubble of happiness she'd been floating in for the past 2 days burst spectacularly, leaving her feeling exposed and ashamed. What exactly are they saying? She asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Jessica hesitated, then pulled up something on her phone. Someone took a photo. Michelle's heart stopped. Jessica showed her the screen, and there it was. a distant but unmistakable image of Ragnar raising her hand to his lips outside the restaurant. While somewhat blurry, it was clearly intimate, romantic, completely inappropriate between a boss and employee. "Oh, God," Michelle whispered, covering her face with her hands. "Oh, God, oh, God. Hey, look at me." Jessica reached across the table and gently pulled Michelle's hands away from her face. "It's going to be okay. We'll figure this out." "No, you don't understand. This ruins everything. My career, my reputation, his reputation." Michelle felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "People are going to think I slept my way into this position." "Did you?" "Jessica, I'm just asking, because if you didn't, and I know you didn't, then you have nothing to be ashamed of. So what if you're attracted to each other? You're both single adults." "He's my boss, Jess. There are rules about this kind of thing, policies. I could lose my job." Before Jessica could respond, Michelle's phone buzzed with a text from Ragnar. "Can you come to my office? We need to talk." The formal tone of the message was so different from his warm texts the day before that Michelle knew he'd heard about the rumors too. "I have to go," she said, standing on unsteady legs. "Michelle, wait." But Michelle was already walking away, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. By the time she reached the executive floor, she had convinced herself that Ragnar was going to end whatever was happening between them to protect his position. Karen looked up as Michelle approached, her usual friendly demeanor replaced by professional coolness. "He's waiting for you," she said simply. But Michelle caught the slight emphasis on waiting that suggested this meeting was not going to be pleasant. Michelle knocked and entered Ragnar's office to find him standing at his window, hands clasped behind his back in the pose she now recognized as his way of processing difficult situations. He didn't turn around immediately when she entered. "Close the door," he said quietly. The click of the door closing felt like a death knell. Michelle stood just inside the office, her hands clasped so tightly in front of her that her knuckles were white. "You've heard," Ragnar said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." Finally he turned to face her, and Michelle's heart broke a little at what she saw in his expression. The warmth and wonder that had been there just yesterday was replaced by the cold, controlled mask he wore in business meetings. "Show me," he said simply. With trembling fingers, Michelle pulled up the photo on her phone and handed it to him. She watched his jaw clench as he studied the image, his blue eyes growing stormy. "Damn," he said softly, handing the phone back to her. "I'm sorry, Michelle, this is my fault." "Your fault? I should have been more careful. I should have thought about how this would look, what it could do to your reputation." He ran a hand through his hair, disrupting his usually perfect style. "I was selfish." The word stung. "Selfish? I wanted to be with you so badly that I didn't consider the consequences, and now you're paying the price." Michelle felt something cold settle in her stomach. "What are you saying?" Ragnar moved to his desk, putting the large piece of furniture between them like a barrier. When he spoke again, his voice had taken on the impersonal tone he used in board meetings. "I think it would be best if we transferred you back to your original position, with a commendation, of course, and a salary increase to reflect your excellent work on the Austin project." The words hit Michelle like a slap. "You're firing me. I'm protecting you. If you go back to your old job, people will assume this was all professional. The rumors will die down. And what about us?" The question came out smaller than she intended. For just a moment, his professional mask slipped, revealing the pain underneath. "There is no us, Michelle. There can't be. I should have realized that from the beginning." Michelle felt like the ground was falling out from under her. "So that's it? One photo and you're just done?" "It's not that simple." "It sounds pretty simple to me." Anger was beginning to replace the hurt, giving her strength. "Yesterday you were talking about taking me to dinner, about wanting to hold my hands in public. Today you're acting like I'm some kind of liability you need to manage." "You're not a liability. Then what am I?" She stepped closer to his desk, her voice rising slightly. "Because right now I feel like I'm something you're ashamed of." "I'm not ashamed of you." His voice cracked slightly on the words. "I'm ashamed of myself, for putting you in this position, for not thinking it through, for being selfish enough to think we could make this work. We could make it work if you weren't such a coward." The word hung in the air between them like a challenge. Ragnar's eyes flashed, and for a moment she saw the man who had kissed her so tenderly just 2 nights ago. "A coward? Yes. You're so afraid of what people might think, of how it might affect your precious reputation, that you're willing to throw away something real." Tears were starting to fall now, but Michelle didn't care. "You told me you valued authenticity. But the first time it gets difficult, you run back to your corporate shell. It's not about my reputation. Then what is it about? It's about yours. The words exploded out of him, raw and painful. Do you know what they're saying about you downstairs? They're calling you a gold digger, saying you seduced me for the promotion. They're questioning every piece of work you've done, every accomplishment you've earned. Each word was like a knife to Michelle's heart, but she forced herself to stand straight. And you believe them? Of course not. But you're going to let them win anyway. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to maintain some dignity. You know what? You're right. You are selfish, but not for the reasons you think. Michelle, you're selfish because you're making this decision for both of us. You're deciding what I can and can't handle, what my reputation is worth, what risks I'm willing to take. You never even asked me what I wanted. The accusation seemed to hit him like a physical blow. What do you want? I want to fight for this. I want to prove that what we have is real, that it's worth the gossip and the stares and the whispers. I want to be brave enough to stand up for something that matters. Her voice broke slightly, but I can't do it alone. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Hope, longing, the ghost of the man who had held her so carefully just days before. But then the mask slipped back into place. I can't give you what you want, Michelle. I'm sorry. The finality in his voice was like a door slamming shut. Michelle nodded slowly, feeling something inside her chest shatter into 1,000 pieces. I understand, she said quietly. You're not the man I thought you were. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her at the door. Michelle. She looked back, hoping against hope that he had changed his mind, that he was going to fight for them after all. I'll make sure the transition back to your old position is seamless, and the salary increase is non-negotiable. You've earned it. The professional tone was the final nail in the coffin. Michelle straightened her shoulders and looked him directly in the eye. Keep your money, Ragnar. Some things can't be bought. She walked out of his office with her head held high, but the moment the elevator doors closed, she collapsed against the wall and let the tears come. 3 floors below, Jessica was waiting with tissues and fierce loyalty, ready to help pick up the pieces of Michelle's broken heart. She was supposed to be moving on, but her heart had other plans. 2 weeks had passed since Michelle walked out of Ragnar's office, and the Tech Vision building felt like a minefield of whispered conversations and pointed stares. She had returned to her old position as promised, but the damage to her reputation lingered like smoke after a fire, invisible but impossible to ignore. Michelle sat at her original desk, the familiar cubicle feeling smaller than before after her brief taste of the executive floor. The Denver project files had been quietly transferred to another team, and she'd thrown herself into mundane administrative tasks with the kind of desperate focus that comes from trying not to think about what you've lost. You look terrible, Jessica announced, appearing at her desk with 2 cups of coffee and the blunt honesty that came with true friendship. Good morning to you too, Michelle replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. She knew Jessica was right. The sleepless nights showed in the dark circles under her eyes, and she'd lost weight from stress and a complete lack of appetite. Have you eaten anything today? I had toast this morning. It's 2 p.m., Michelle. Toast doesn't count as sustenance. Jessica perched on the edge of the desk, her expression shifting from teasing to concerned. You can't keep doing this to yourself. Doing what? Pretending you're fine when you're clearly falling apart. When's the last time you actually smiled? And I mean really smiled, not that fake thing you do when people ask how you're doing. Michelle stared at her computer screen, unwilling to meet Jessica's knowing gaze. I'm processing. It takes time. You're punishing yourself. There's a difference. Before Michelle could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Michelle, this is Emma Carter, Ragnar's sister. Could we meet for coffee? I'm in Chicago for a few days. Michelle's heart stopped. She showed the message to Jessica, who raised her eyebrows. Well, that's unexpected. Are you going to respond? I don't know. What could she possibly want to talk about? Only one way to find out. An hour later, Michelle found herself sitting in a small cafe 3 blocks from Tech Vision, nervously stirring her latte while waiting for a woman she'd never met, but who shared DNA with the man who'd broken her heart. Emma Carter turned out to be a younger, feminine version of Ragnar. Same piercing blue eyes, same aristocratic bone structure, but with warm smile lines and an approachable energy that her brother lacked. She spotted Michelle immediately and approached with confident strides. Michelle, I'm Emma. Thank you for agreeing to meet me. Emma slid into the opposite seat, studying Michelle with frank curiosity. You're even prettier than I imagined. "I'm sorry, but I'm not sure why you wanted to see me." Emma signaled the waitress for coffee before responding. "Because my brother is an idiot, and someone needs to set the record straight." The blunt statement caught Michelle off guard. "I'm sorry? Ragnar. He's been impossible for the past 2 weeks, snapping at everyone, working 18-hour days, drinking too much scotch, and generally making everyone around him miserable." Emma leaned forward, her expression earnest. "He told me what happened. About the photo, the rumors, the decision to end things." Michelle felt her chest tighten. "Then you know there's nothing to discuss. He made his choice. He made a stupid choice based on fear, not logic, but that doesn't mean it's final." It felt pretty final to me. Emma's coffee arrived, and she took a thoughtful sip before continuing. "Can I tell you something about my brother? He's spent his entire life building walls to protect himself. Our parents, they're not warm people. They treated Ragnar like a business asset from the time he could walk. Every relationship he's had has been with women who wanted something from him. Money, status, connections. I never wanted any of those things," Michelle said quietly. "I know. That's exactly why he's terrified." Emma's smile was sad but understanding. "You represent something he's never had before, genuine affection without conditions. And that scares him more than any corporate takeover or business rival ever could." Michelle felt tears prick at her eyes. "Then why didn't he fight for us?" "Because fighting would mean admitting he cares more about you than his reputation, and he's not sure he deserves to be that happy." Emma reached across the table and squeezed Michelle's hand. "But watching him these past 2 weeks, I've never seen him so miserable. He's realized what he gave up. It doesn't matter. He was right about one thing. The rumors haven't stopped. If anything, they've gotten worse since I went back to my old job. People think I got rejected after trying to seduce him. And do you care what those people think?" The question was simple, but it cut straight to the heart of Michelle's struggle. "I want to say no, but you're human, and no one likes being gossiped about." Emma nodded understandingly. "I get it. But can I ask you something? Do you love him?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Michelle had been so careful not to use that word, even in her own thoughts, but hearing it spoken aloud made her realize the truth she'd been hiding from. "Yes," she whispered. "I think I do." "Then fight for him." "He doesn't want me to. He doesn't think he deserves you. There's a difference." Emma pulled out her phone and showed Michelle a photo, Ragnar at what looked like a family dinner, but his usual confident expression was replaced by something hollow and tired. "This was taken 3 days ago. Does this look like a man who's happy with his decision?" Michelle studied the image, her heart clenching at the pain visible in Ragnar's face. "What do you want me to do? Come to the charity gala tomorrow night?" "What gala?" "The annual Children's Hospital fundraiser. Ragnar's company is the primary sponsor, so he'll be there. It's black tie, very public, lots of important people." Michelle shook her head immediately. "I can't. I don't have a dress. I don't know anyone. And after everything that's happened, I'll help you with the dress, you'll know me, and as for everything that's happened, this is your chance to rewrite the story." Emma's eyes were bright with determination. "Show up, look absolutely stunning, and remind him what he's giving up. And if he rejects me publicly, then at least you'll know you tried. But I don't think he will. I think seeing you there, brave enough to face all those people who've been gossiping about you, will remind him why he fell for you in the first place." The idea was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Michelle felt her pulse quicken at the thought of walking into a room full of Chicago's elite, of facing Ragnar in front of everyone who'd been whispering about them. "I don't know." "Michelle, let me ask you something. 2 weeks ago, before all this happened, were you happy?" "Yes, happier than I'd ever been." "And now?" "Miserable." "Then what do you have to lose?" That evening, Michelle stood in her small apartment staring at the elegant black dress Emma had delivered, a simple but stunning designer piece that fit her perfectly and made her skin glow. A note was attached. "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is show up. You've got this." Michelle's phone rang, and her mother's familiar voice filled the room. "Mija, how are you? You sounded so sad when we talked yesterday." "I'm okay, Mama. Just figuring some things out." "This is about that man, isn't it? The one you didn't tell me about, but I could hear in your voice?" Michelle smiled despite herself. Mothers always knew. "Maybe. Do you love him?" "I think so." "Then fight for him, baby girl. Love doesn't come around very often, and when it does, you don't let it go without a fight." The next evening, Michelle stood outside the Palmer House Hilton, watching Chicago's elite stream into the charity gala. The dress fit like a dream. Her natural hair was styled in elegant curls, and Emma's borrowed jewelry caught the light beautifully. She looked like she belonged here, even if she felt like an imposter. Taking a deep breath, she walked through the doors and into her future. The ballroom was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers, elegant floral arrangements, and Chicago's most powerful people networking over champagne and canapes. Michelle accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing waiter and tried to blend into the crowd while searching for familiar faces. She found Emma first, radiant in midnight blue and deep in conversation with a distinguished older couple. When Emma spotted her, her face lit up with approval. "Michelle, you look absolutely stunning." Emma made quick introductions before leaning in close. "He's by the silent auction tables, and he looks like he'd rather be anywhere else." Michelle's heart raced as she spotted him across the room. Ragnar stood near a display of auction items, wearing a perfectly tailored black tuxedo that made him look like he'd stepped out of a magazine. But Emma was right. His usual confident posture was missing, replaced by something that looked almost defeated. "Go," Emma whispered. "Before you lose your nerve." Michelle walked across the ballroom, her heels clicking against the marble floor, her chin held high despite the trembling in her hands. She was halfway to him when he looked up and saw her. The effect was immediate and devastating. Ragnar's face went through a series of emotions: surprise, longing, pain, and something that looked like awe. Their eyes locked across the crowded room, and suddenly all the noise and chatter faded into background static. She had found her courage. Now she just had to hope he would find his. He thought he was protecting her, but she was done being protected. The ballroom seemed to hold its breath as Michelle walked toward Ragnar, every step deliberate and graceful, despite the storm of emotions raging inside her chest. She was vaguely aware of heads turning, conversations pausing, the subtle shift in energy that happens when something significant is about to unfold in a room full of people who thrive on drama. Ragnar stood frozen beside the silent auction display, his champagne glass forgotten in his hand as he watched her approach. Michelle had never seen him look so vulnerable, the careful mask of corporate confidence completely stripped away, leaving only raw emotion in his eyes. "Hello, Ragnar," she said when she reached him, her voice steady, despite the way her heart was hammering against her ribs. "Michelle." Her name came out rough, like he hadn't spoken in days. What are you doing here? Your sister invited me." She gestured slightly toward where Emma stood watching them, with poorly concealed satisfaction. "She thought we should talk." "Emma invited you." Something flickered across his face: surprise, gratitude, and what might have been hope. "I should have known she'd interfere." "Is that what this is? Interference?" Ragnar set down his champagne and ran a hand through his hair, disrupting his usually perfect style. "I don't know what this is. I just know that seeing you here, looking—" He trailed off, his eyes taking in her elegant dress, the confident way she held herself. "You look beautiful, Michelle. Absolutely stunning. Thank you." She accepted the compliment with grace, but didn't let it derail her purpose. "We need to talk." "Here? Now?" His eyes darted around the crowded ballroom. "People are watching. Let them watch." The strength in her own voice surprised her. "I'm done hiding, Ragnar. I'm done pretending that what happened between us wasn't real just to make other people comfortable." Before he could respond, the orchestra began playing a slow, romantic waltz. Couples around them started moving toward the dance floor, and Michelle made a decision that would have terrified her 3 weeks ago. "Dance with me," she said, extending her hand. "Michelle, I'm not asking you to think. I'm asking you to dance with me. One song. Then we can talk." For a moment he just stared at her outstretched hand like it was something dangerous. Then slowly, he reached out and took it, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that felt like coming home. They moved to the dance floor in silence, the tension between them palpable. When Ragnar placed his hand on her waist and drew her close, Michelle felt every nerve ending in her body come alive. They began to move together, finding their rhythm effortlessly despite never having danced together before. "You shouldn't be here," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "Why? Because it makes you uncomfortable. Because being near you makes me want things I can't have." Michelle pulled back slightly to look into his eyes. "Says who? Says reality. Says the fact that I'm your boss and you're my employee, and there are rules. I quit." The word stopped him mid-sentence, mid-step. Other couples swirled around them as they stood motionless in the center of the dance floor. "You what?" "I quit. I handed in my resignation this afternoon, effective immediately." Michelle's chin lifted defiantly. "So now I'm not your employee. I'm just a woman who's tired of watching the man she loves run away from something beautiful because he's afraid of what people might think. The word loves hung between them like a confession, and Michelle saw the exact moment it hit him. His grip on her hand tightened, his eyes searching her face as if he couldn't quite believe what he'd heard. "You love me." His voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes, I love you. I love your stupid, noble attempt to protect my reputation, even when it breaks both our hearts. I love the way you remember details about people's lives and the way you make me feel like I'm the only person in the room. I love that you're kind to the cleaning staff and that you water my succulent when you think I'm not looking." Each declaration seemed to crack something open inside him. "Michelle, I love you, Ragnar Carter, and I'm done pretending I don't just to make everyone else comfortable." Her voice grew stronger, more confident. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" He stared at her for a long moment, and Michelle could see the war happening behind his eyes, fear battling hope, logic fighting emotion, the careful control he'd built his life around crumbling in the face of something real and raw and beautiful. "I'm going to kiss you," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "Right here in front of everyone, and I don't care who sees it or what they think or what it costs me." "Good," Michelle breathed. "It's about time." He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs tracing the line of her cheekbones, and leaned down to capture her lips with his. The kiss was nothing like their first gentle, hesitant meeting of mouths. This was desperate and claiming and full of 2 weeks' worth of suppressed longing. Around them the music swelled, but Michelle was only dimly aware of the gasps and murmurs from the watching crowd. All that mattered was the feel of Ragnar's lips on hers, the way his hands held her like she was something precious, the way her entire world had narrowed down to this moment, this man, this choice to be brave. When they finally broke apart, breathing hard, the ballroom had gone notably quiet. Michelle became aware of hundreds of pairs of eyes watching them, of phones discreetly raised to capture the moment, of the hushed conversations starting at the edges of the crowd. "Well," Ragnar said, his forehead resting against hers, "I guess that answers the question about whether we're keeping this secret." Michelle laughed, the sound bright and free. "I guess it does." "Michelle, He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. "I've been an idiot. These past 2 weeks I've been miserable. I've missed you so much it felt like missing a limb." "Then why didn't you call? Why didn't you fight for us?" "Because I was terrified," he admitted, the vulnerability in his voice making her heart clench. "I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you, and I didn't know how to protect that. I thought if I pushed you away at least you'd be safe from the gossip and the speculation. I don't need you to protect me from gossip, Ragnar. I need you to stand beside me and face it together. I know that now." He pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her waist. "Emma may have mentioned something about me being an emotionally stunted coward who was throwing away the best thing that ever happened to him. Your sister is a very smart woman. She gets it from our side of the family." His smile was soft, genuine, the first real smile she'd seen from him in weeks. "Michelle, I love you too. I've loved you since that first day in the cafe, when you talked about waiting for someone who would really love you. I want to be that someone. I want to love you the way you deserve to be loved." Tears pricked at Michelle's eyes, but they were happy tears this time. "Even if it's complicated, even if people talk, especially then, let them talk. Let them speculate. Let them take all the pictures they want." He gestured toward the crowd of onlookers, many of whom were still staring. "I love you and I'm not hiding it anymore." The orchestra, apparently deciding that the drama had reached its peak, began playing again. Ragnar and Michelle started moving together once more, lost in their own world despite being the center of attention. "So what happens now?" Michelle asked as they swayed together. "Now? Now I take you to dinner at the most public restaurant in Chicago and hold your hand where everyone can see. Now I tell anyone who will listen that I'm dating the most incredible woman in the world. Now I stop being afraid of my own happiness. And the company? The policies about workplace relationships? You said you quit. I did. But I might be open to renegotiation if the terms were right." Ragnar's laugh was rich and warm. "I think we can work something out. Maybe a position in a different department reporting to someone else. Equal pay, equal respect. No special treatment except for the special treatment you get from me after hours." "After hours, huh?" "After hours, I plan to spend a lot of time showing you exactly how much I love you." His voice dropped to that intimate tone that made her stomach flutter. "Starting with a proper first date. Dinner, conversation, maybe a walk by the lake. Completely traditional and romantic. I'd like that." "Good, because I have a lot of lost time to make up for." As the song ended, They became aware of applause starting from somewhere in the crowd. Emma was clapping enthusiastically, tears of joy streaming down her face, and slowly other guests joined in until the entire ballroom was filled with the sound of approval. "I think they like us," Michelle said, grinning up at Ragnar. "I think they do, but it doesn't matter what they think. All that matters is what we think." "And what do we think?" "We think," Ragnar said, spinning her once before pulling her back into his arms, "that sometimes the best things in life are worth fighting for, even when it's scary, even when it's complicated, even when everyone is watching." Michelle rose up on her tiptoes and kissed him again, soft and sweet this time, a promise of all the kisses to come. And in that moment, surrounded by Chicago's elite and the swirl of gossip and speculation, they realized that love, real, honest, brave love, was stronger than any rumor, any scandal, any fear. She had thought love would be the hardest part, but learning to trust happiness was proving even more challenging. 3 months later, Michelle stood in her new office on the 35th floor of Tech Vision Industries, watching the Chicago sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Her title read Senior Strategic Analyst. She reported to the head of business development rather than Ragnar, and her salary reflected her actual worth to the company. It was everything she'd dreamed of professionally, but more importantly, it was something she'd earned through her own merit. A soft knock on her door made her turn. Ragnar stood in the doorway holding 2 coffee cups, his hair slightly mussed from the wind, and his smile soft with the kind of contentment that had become familiar over the past few months. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, closing the door behind him and crossing to where she stood by the window. "Good morning yourself." She accepted the coffee gratefully, breathing in the familiar scent of the vanilla latte he'd memorized as her favorite. "You're early today. Couldn't sleep. Too excited about tonight." He set his own coffee down and wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder as they both looked out at the city waking up below them. Tonight. Michelle's stomach fluttered with a mixture of excitement and nervousness that had been building for weeks. Tonight was the company's annual awards dinner, where she would be recognized for her work on the Austin expansion project, the project that had brought them together in the first place. But more than that, tonight felt like a public acknowledgement of how far they'd both come. "Are you nervous?" Ragnar asked, as if reading her thoughts. "A little. It's still surreal sometimes, you know. 6 months ago, I was just Michelle Torres from the administrative pool. Now I'm giving a presentation to the board of directors and dating the CEO. You were never just anything, Michelle. I just helped everyone else see what was already there." She leaned back against his chest, marveling at how natural this felt, standing in her office in his arms, sharing coffee and quiet conversation before the building filled with people. The rumors had died down after their very public declaration at the charity gala, replaced by something that looked suspiciously like respect. Turns out, people admired a love story when it was handled with dignity and authenticity. "Michelle?" Ragnar's voice had taken on a different quality, something nervous and hopeful that made her turn in his arms to look at him. "Yes? There's something I want to talk to you about, something I've been thinking about for a while now." Before she could respond, her office door burst open and Jessica rushed in, practically vibrating with excitement. "Oh my God, Michelle, you will not believe—" She stopped short when she saw Ragnar's arms around Michelle, her eyes widening. "Oh, sorry, I didn't realize you were— I mean, I should have knocked. It's okay, Jess," Michelle said, stepping slightly away from Ragnar, but keeping his hand in hers. "What's got you so excited this early in the morning?" "The Tribune. Did you see the Tribune?" Jessica waved her phone frantically. "There's an article about Chicago's power couples, and you two are featured, with a gorgeous photo from the charity gala." Michelle felt her cheeks warm. Even 3 months later, seeing their relationship discussed in the media felt surreal. "What does it say?" "Listen to this." Jessica cleared her throat dramatically. "In a city known for its ambitious power players, few couples embody both professional success and authentic romance like Tech Vision Industries CEO Ragnar Carter and senior strategic analyst Michelle Torres. Their love story, which began in the corporate halls and bloomed into one of Chicago's most watched relationships, proves that sometimes the best partnerships are built on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than social climbing and convenience." Ragnar squeezed Michelle's hand. "Not terrible as media coverage goes." "There's more," Jessica continued reading. "Torres, who recently spearheaded the company's successful expansion into emerging markets, brings both brilliance and grace to her role as one of Chicago's most influential young professionals. Carter, meanwhile, has been credited with fostering a more inclusive and collaborative corporate culture since publicly acknowledging his relationship with Torres. Together, they represent a new generation of leadership that values authenticity over appearances. "Wow," Michelle said softly. "That's actually really nice." "Nice? It's amazing. You're being recognized for your own accomplishments, not just as someone's girlfriend. This is huge, Michelle." After Jessica left, still bubbling with excitement about the article, Michelle and Ragnar found themselves alone again. But the mood had shifted slightly, the weight of public attention settling over them, like a reminder of how much their lives had changed. "Do you ever regret it?" Michelle asked suddenly. "Going public, dealing with all the attention." Ragnar was quiet for a moment, considering her question seriously. "Do you want the honest answer?" "Always. Sometimes I miss the privacy. Sometimes I wish we could just be a normal couple without every dinner date and public appearance being photographed and analyzed." He turned to face her fully. "But regret being with you. Regret choosing love over fear. Never. Not for a single second." The sincerity in his voice made Michelle's heart skip. "Even when that blogger wrote that terrible piece about me being a gold digger?" "Especially then, because watching you handle that with such grace and dignity made me fall even more in love with you." His hands came up to frame her face. "Michelle, you've made me a better man. You've made me braver, more honest, more willing to fight for what matters. How could I ever regret that?" Before Michelle could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Mija, saw the article. So proud of you. Can't wait to meet Ragnar at Christmas." The reminder of their upcoming visit to San Antonio made Michelle smile. "Speaking of family, my mom is very excited to interrogate you over Christmas dinner. I'm looking forward to it. I want to thank her for raising such an incredible woman. She's going to love you. Fair warning, though. She's going to ask when you're planning to propose, probably within the first 5 minutes of meeting you." The words slipped out before Michelle could stop them, and she immediately felt her cheeks burn. They hadn't talked about marriage explicitly, though the topic had started creeping into their conversations in subtle ways. Ragnar's eyes lit up with something that looked like mischief. "Well, that's convenient timing." "What do you mean?" Instead of answering, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Michelle's breath caught in her throat as he dropped to one knee right there in her office, with the Chicago skyline as their backdrop. "This is what I was trying to talk to you about earlier," he said, his voice soft but steady. "Michelle Elena Torres, 6 months ago, you walked into my life and turned everything upside down in the best possible way. You taught me that love isn't something to be managed or controlled. It's something to be cherished and fought for and celebrated." Michelle felt tears start to fall as he opened the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring, not ostentatious or flashy, but elegant and timeless, exactly what she would have chosen for herself. "You showed me what it means to be truly brave, to stand up for what matters even when it's scary. You've been my partner, my best friend, my anchor, and my inspiration." His voice cracked slightly with emotion. "I can't imagine my life without you in it, and I don't want to try. Will you marry me?" The question hung in the air between them, surrounded by morning sunlight and the quiet hum of the building coming to life around them. Michelle looked down at this powerful, successful man kneeling in her office, offering her not just his love, but his entire future, and felt her heart overflow with joy. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, "Yes, of course, yes." Ragnar slipped the ring onto her finger with trembling hands, then stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed through her tears. When he set her down, he kissed her with a passion that spoke of promises and forever, and dreams coming true. "I love you, Mrs. Carter-to-be," he murmured against her lips. "I love you too, Mr. Torres Carter," she replied, making him laugh. "Hyphenating? We'll negotiate." A knock on the door interrupted them, and Jessica's voice called out, "Michelle, are you okay? I heard shouting and, oh my God!" The last part came out as a shriek as Jessica caught sight of the ring on Michelle's finger. "He proposed. You're engaged. This is the best day ever." Within minutes, word had spread through the office, and Michelle's door was filled with well-wishes and congratulations. But through it all, she kept looking at Ragnar, at the man who had started as her boss and become her everything, and marveling at how life could change so completely in such a short time. That evening, at the awards dinner, Michelle stood at the podium accepting recognition for her work on the Austin project. As she spoke about market analysis and strategic planning, her eyes found Ragnar's in the audience. He was watching her with such pride and love that she had to pause for a moment to collect herself. "In closing," she said, looking directly at him, "this project taught me that the best outcomes happen when you're willing to take risks for something you believe in, when you're brave enough to fight for what matters even when it seems impossible." The applause was thunderous, but all Michelle could hear was Ragnar's voice from that morning. How could I ever regret that? As she walked off the stage toward her future husband, Michelle realized that sometimes the greatest risk of all is allowing yourself to be truly, completely happy. 1 year later, she finally understood what her mother meant when she said love wasn't just about finding someone, it was about becoming who you were meant to be. The morning of their wedding dawned crisp and clear, with October sunlight streaming through the windows of the bridal suite at the Drake Hotel. Michelle sat in front of an ornate mirror, watching her reflection as the makeup artist applied the final touches to her look. Her natural hair was styled in elegant braids, woven with tiny white flowers, and her grandmother's pearl earrings caught the light every time she moved. The wedding dress hung nearby, a masterpiece of silk and lace that her mother had helped her choose during one of many emotional shopping trips. It was simple but stunning, with intricate beadwork that caught the light and a flowing train that would trail behind her as she walked down the aisle. "Mija, you look like a princess," her mother said from across the room, tears already threatening to ruin her carefully applied makeup. Maria Torres had arrived in Chicago 3 days ago and had spent every moment since then alternating between crying happy tears and interrogating the catering staff about the reception menu. "Don't cry, Mama. You'll make me cry too," Michelle said, standing carefully to avoid wrinkled her silk robe. "And we haven't even put the dress on yet." A soft knock interrupted them, and Jessica's voice called through the door. "Michelle, Emma's here and she brought something for you." "Come in." Emma Carter entered with her usual graceful confidence, carrying a small wrapped box and wearing the radiant smile that had become familiar over the past year. She and Michelle had grown close, bonded by their shared affection for Ragnar and Emma's wicked sense of humor about her brother's romantic cluelessness. "From the groom," Emma said, presenting the box with mock formality. "He's been pacing his suite for the past hour, driving the groomsmen crazy. I told him if he didn't stop, I was going to drug his coffee." Michelle opened the box with trembling fingers to find a delicate tennis bracelet made of diamonds and sapphires. The sapphires the exact shade of blue as Ragnar's eyes. A note was tucked underneath, "For my brilliant wife-to-be. Thank you for teaching me that the best investments are made with the heart. I can't wait to spend forever showing you how much I love you." "Oh," Michelle breathed, her eyes filling with tears despite her best efforts. "He chose it himself," Emma said softly. "Spent 3 hours at the jewelry store asking questions about cut and clarity and whether the setting would be comfortable for daily wear. The saleswoman said she'd never seen a man more determined to find the perfect piece." Michelle fastened the bracelet around her wrist, marveling at how the stones caught the light. It was exactly something Ragnar would choose, beautiful but practical, luxurious but not ostentatious, a piece she could wear every day and think of him. "How is he?" Michelle asked, suddenly nervous about seeing him at the altar. "Terrified and ecstatic in equal measure," Emma replied honestly. "He keeps checking his watch and asking if you've changed your mind. I finally had to remind him that you're the one who proposed the short engagement because you didn't want to wait." It was true. After Ragnar's proposal, Michelle had suggested a quick wedding, partly because she didn't want the stress of a long engagement, but mostly because she was ready to start their married life together. They had both waited long enough for happiness. "Ladies," Jessica announced from the doorway, "it's time." The next hour passed in a blur of final preparations. Michelle's mother fastened the buttons on the wedding dress, 37 tiny pearl buttons that ran from the base of Michelle's neck to her waist. Emma arranged the flowing train, while Jessica made sure the flowers in Michelle's hair were perfectly positioned. When Michelle finally looked at herself in the full-length mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. The dress fit like it had been made for her, emphasizing her natural curves while maintaining an air of elegant sophistication. But more than that, she looked happy, truly, deeply, radiantly happy, in a way that seemed to glow from within. "Oh, baby girl," her mother whispered, coming to stand beside her. "Your father would be so proud." The mention of her father made Michelle's throat tighten with emotion, but it was a good ache, the kind that comes from missing someone while also feeling their love surrounding you. "I wish he could be here," Michelle said softly. "He is here, Mija. In every choice that brought you to this moment, in every lesson he taught you about waiting for real love, in the strength you've shown throughout this whole journey. He's here. The limousine ride to the church passed quickly, filled with last-minute touch-ups and nervous laughter. Michelle had chosen to get married at St. Alphonsus, a beautiful old church on the north side, where the light streamed through stained glass windows in jeweled patterns that reminded her of kaleidoscopes. As they pulled up to the church, Michelle could see guests filing in, colleagues from Tech Vision, college friends who had flown in from Texas, Emma's friends from London, and Ragnar's business associates who had become genuine friends over the past year. The guest list was small but meaningful, filled with people who had supported their love story from the beginning. "You ready for this?" Jessica asked, adjusting Michelle's veil one final time. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life." The processional began with Emma walking down the aisle in her sage green bridesmaid dress, followed by Jessica in a complementary shade of dusty rose. Michelle watched from the back of the church as her friends took their places at the altar, and then the wedding march began. The church doors opened, and Michelle got her first glimpse of Ragnar waiting for her at the end of the aisle. He looked magnificent in his black tuxedo, his hair perfectly styled, his blue eyes bright with unshed tears as he watched her appear in the doorway. But what took her breath away wasn't how handsome he looked. It was the expression on his face, pure joy, complete adoration, and something that looked like wonder, as if he couldn't quite believe this moment was real. Michelle's mother squeezed her arm. "Go get him, baby girl." And then Michelle was walking down the aisle, her eyes locked on Ragnar's, her heart so full of love and gratitude that she felt like she might float right off the ground. She was vaguely aware of guests standing, of camera flashes and soft gasps of admiration, but all that really mattered was the man waiting for her at the altar. When she reached him, Ragnar stepped forward to take her hands, his eyes never leaving her face. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," he whispered, just loud enough for her to hear. "So are you," she whispered back, making him smile, that soft, genuine smile that was hers alone. The ceremony itself passed in a haze of emotion and spoken vows. When it came time for their personal promises, Michelle found herself speaking from the heart without needing to reference the notes she'd prepared. "Ragnar," she began, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "A year and a half ago I was a woman who had never been kissed, who thought love was something that happened to other people. You showed me that I was wrong. Not about love being magical, but about it being out of reach. You taught me that love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone whose imperfections complement yours perfectly." She paused, looking into his eyes and seeing her entire future reflected there. "You've supported my dreams, celebrated my successes, and held me through my fears. You've shown me what it means to be truly partnered with someone, to have a love that makes both people stronger. I promise to stand beside you through everything life brings us, to be your soft place to land and your biggest cheerleader, to love you fiercely and completely for all the days of my life." When Ragnar spoke his vows, his voice was rough with emotion but unwavering in its conviction. "Michelle, you saved me from a life I didn't even realize was empty. Before you, I thought success was measured in dollars and deals and corporate achievements. You showed me that the real measure of a life well lived is love, given freely, received gratefully, and shared completely." He squeezed her hands gently. "I promise to love you not just in the easy moments, but especially in the difficult ones. I promise to be your partner in all things, to respect your independence while building our interdependence, to make our love a priority above all else. I promise to spend every day trying to be worthy of the gift of your heart." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Ragnar kissed her with all the love and promise of their shared future, Michelle felt like every difficult moment, every lonely night, every tear she'd had been worth it to arrive at this perfect, shining moment. The reception was a celebration in every sense of the word. They danced their first dance to "At Last" by Etta James, swaying together in the middle of the dance floor, while their friends and family watched with tears of joy. Later, during the dinner speeches, Emma regaled the guests with stories of Ragnar's romantic cluelessness, while Jessica shared tales of Michelle's transformation from shy assistant to confident powerhouse. But the moment that meant the most to Michelle came near the end of the evening, when her mother pulled her aside for a private conversation. "Mija," Maria said, taking Michelle's hands in hers, "I want you to know how proud I am of the woman you've become. Not just today, but throughout this whole journey. You waited for real love, you fought for it when it was threatened, and you've built something beautiful together. Thank you, Mama, for everything, for supporting me, for raising me to know my worth, for teaching me to be brave. That courage was always inside you, baby girl. You just needed to find it. Maria smiled through her tears. Your father used to say that the best love stories aren't about finding your prince. They're about becoming your own queen first. You did that, Michelle. You became your own queen, and then you found your equal. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Michelle found herself standing on the hotel's terrace with Ragnar, looking out over the Chicago skyline that had been the backdrop for their entire love story. She was still wearing her wedding dress, though she'd kicked off her heels hours ago, and Ragnar had loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves. "So, Mrs. Carter," he said, pulling her close and resting his chin on top of her head, "how does it feel to be married?" "Like coming home," she said without hesitation. "Like everything in my life finally makes sense." "I know exactly what you mean." He turned her in his arms so she was facing him. "Michelle, I need you to know something. Every day with you has been better than the last, and I can't wait to see what our future holds. Whatever comes, kids, career changes, growing old together, I want to face it all with you." "Kids?" Michelle raised an eyebrow teasingly. "We haven't even been married for 6 hours and you're already planning our family?" "I've been planning our family since the day you said yes to my proposal, but only if you want that too." "I want everything with you," she said simply. "The whole beautiful, complicated, wonderful mess of a life together." As they kissed under the Chicago stars, Michelle marveled at how much had changed since that day in the company cafe when she'd whispered her secret to Jessica. She had been so afraid then, afraid of being different, of wanting too much, of never finding someone who could love her the way she dreamed of being loved. Now she understood that all of those fears had been preparing her for this moment, this love, this man who saw her exactly as she was and chose her anyway. She had waited 28 years for her first kiss, but it had been worth every lonely night to have it be with the man she would spend the rest of her life kissing. Sometimes the best things in life are worth waiting for, not because they're perfect, but because when they arrive, they make everything that came before make perfect sense. 5 years later, she still came back to that company cafe sometimes, but now with peace in her heart and a different kind of hunger. The autumn sun streamed through the familiar floor-to-ceiling windows of Tech Vision Industries as Michelle Carter walked through the executive floor, her heels clicking confidently against the marble she once thought she'd never belong on. At 33, she moved with the assured grace of a woman who had found her place in the world and claimed it completely. The nameplate on her corner office read, Michelle Carter, Chief Innovation Officer, a title she'd earned through 5 years of exceptional work, strategic vision, and the kind of leadership that inspired loyalty rather than fear. The company had flourished under the collaborative culture she and Ragnar had fostered together, and Michelle's department had become the crown jewel of Tech Vision's expansion into emerging markets. But today she wasn't thinking about quarterly projections or market analysis. Today she was thinking about the secret she'd been carrying for 2 weeks, the same kind of secret that had started their entire love story, though this one was infinitely sweeter. "Knock, knock," Emma's voice called from the doorway. "Got a minute for your favorite sister-in-law?" "My only sister-in-law," Michelle replied with a grin, looking up from her laptop. Emma looked radiant in her navy business suit, her London polish softened by genuine warmth. She had moved back to Chicago 2 years ago to open the American branch of her consulting firm, and the Carter siblings had never been closer. Details. Emma settled into one of Michelle's guest chairs, studying her with those perceptive blue eyes that ran in the family. "You look like you're bursting with something." Michelle's hand moved unconsciously to her still flat stomach. "What makes you say that?" "Because you have the same expression Ragnar had the week before he proposed, like you're carrying around the world's best secret and you're about to explode from keeping it." Before Michelle could respond, another voice joined the conversation. "Is this where the important women of my life are hiding?" Ragnar appeared in the doorway, and Michelle's heart still skipped a beat at the sight of him, even after 5 years of marriage. He'd aged into his early 40s with distinguished grace, a few silver threads at his temples, laugh lines around his eyes that spoke of happiness rather than stress, and a confidence that came from being a man thoroughly content with his choices. "Your wife is plotting something," Emma announced. "I can tell." "My wife is always plotting something," Ragnar said fondly, crossing to Michelle's desk and perching on the edge in a gesture that had become habitual over the years. "It's one of the things I love most about her." Michelle felt a flutter of nerves mixed with excitement. She had planned to wait until tonight, until they were home in the Lincoln Park brownstone they'd bought 3 years ago, surrounded by the life they'd built together. But looking at these two people who meant everything to her, she realized there would never be a perfect moment, only the moment she chose to make perfect. "Actually," she said, standing and moving to the small safe behind her desk, "there is something I wanted to share with both of you." She pulled out a small wrapped box, similar to the one Ragnar had used to propose, but smaller, more delicate. Her hands trembled slightly as she handed it to her husband. "Michelle," he said carefully, "it's not my birthday, or our anniversary, or... just open it." Ragnar unwrapped the box with the methodical care he brought to everything important, Emma watching with barely contained curiosity. When he lifted the lid, his breath caught audibly. Inside was a tiny pair of baby shoes, soft white leather with delicate blue stitching, and beneath them, a folded piece of paper. With shaking hands, Ragnar unfolded the paper to reveal a sonogram image. For a moment, he just stared at it, his mind clearly processing what he was seeing. Then his eyes flew to Michelle's face, wide with wonder and disbelief and joy so profound it took her breath away. "Are you—" He couldn't seem to finish the sentence. 8 weeks, Michelle said softly. "I wanted to wait until we were past the first trimester to tell anyone, but I couldn't keep it to myself anymore." "Oh my God," Emma breathed, having figured it out. "Oh my God, you're pregnant." Ragnar set the box down carefully and stood, his hands reaching for Michelle with a reverence that reminded her of their wedding day. "We're having a baby." "We're having a baby," she confirmed, laughing as tears started falling down her cheeks. He swept her into his arms, spinning her around the office just like he had the day he proposed, his laughter mixing with hers and Emma's delighted squeals. When he set her down, his hands immediately went to her stomach even though there was nothing to feel yet. "How long have you known?" he asked. 2 weeks. I've been trying to figure out the perfect way to tell you, and then I realized that the perfect way was just this, here with Emma in the place where it all started." "This is incredible," Emma said, wiping away happy tears. "I'm going to be an aunt. Oh, you two are going to be such amazing parents." "Aunt Emma?" Ragnar mused, still looking dazed. "That has a nice ring to it." They spent the next hour talking about due dates and doctor's appointments, and all the practical considerations that came with bringing a new life into the world. But underneath the logistics, Michelle could feel the deeper current of emotion, the recognition that their family was expanding, that the love they'd built together was creating something entirely new. That evening they walked home through Lincoln Park, hand in hand like they had so many times before. The October air was crisp with the promise of winter, and the trees were ablaze with fall colors that painted everything in warm golden light. "I can't believe we're going to be parents," Ragnar said for the 10th time that day. "Nervous?" Michelle asked, though she could see the answer in his expression. Not nervous exactly, but awed by the magnitude of what lay ahead. "Terrified," he admitted, "but also, I can't remember ever being this excited about anything, except maybe marrying you." They stopped at their favorite bench overlooking the lake, the same spot where Ragnar had taken her on their first official date 5 years ago. The city skyline glittered across the water, and Michelle marveled at how different she felt sitting here now, compared to that nervous young woman who had barely known how to accept a compliment. "Can I tell you something?" she said, leaning against his shoulder. "Always. Sometimes I think about that scared 28-year-old who thought she was broken because she'd never been kissed, and I want to tell her that she wasn't broken. She was just waiting for the right story to begin." Ragnar's arm tightened around her. "What would you tell her about us? About all of this?" Michelle was quiet for a moment, watching the lights dance on the water. "I'd tell her that love isn't about finding someone who completes you. It's about finding someone who inspires you to complete yourself. I'd tell her that the best relationships aren't built on need, but on choice. Every day, we choose each other, choose to grow together, choose to face whatever comes as a team." "And what would you tell her about waiting? About saving herself for something real?" "I'd tell her that every lonely night, every rejected date, every moment of feeling different from everyone else was preparing her for something extraordinary, that she was learning to value herself, to understand her own worth so that when love finally came, she'd recognize it and be brave enough to claim it." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city they'd made their home sparkle in the darkness. Finally, Ragnar spoke. "I love you, Michelle Carter. I love the woman you were when I met you, the woman you became as we fell in love, and the woman you're becoming as we build this life together. I love that our child will grow up seeing what real partnership looks like. I love you too." more than I ever thought it was possible to love someone. Michelle placed her hand over his where it rested on her stomach. Do you think we'll be good at this? Parenting? I think we'll figure it out together, just like we've figured out everything else. And I think our kid is going to be incredibly lucky to have you as a mother, and you as a father. As they walked the final few blocks home, Michelle found herself thinking about the young woman she'd been, sitting in that company cafe and whispering her secret to Jessica. That woman had been so afraid of being different, of wanting something that seemed impossible to find. Now, carrying the child of the man who had become her best friend, her partner, her home, Michelle understood that her long wait hadn't been a flaw or a failure. It had been a gift. It had given her the time to become someone worthy of extraordinary love and the wisdom to recognize it when it arrived. 6 months later, on a spring morning that painted Chicago in shades of hope and new beginnings, Michelle and Ragnar welcomed Elena Maria Carter into the world. She had her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined chin, and when she wrapped her tiny fingers around Michelle's thumb for the first time, Michelle knew with absolute certainty that every moment of waiting, every tear shed, every lonely night had been worth it to arrive at this perfect, complete happiness. Some people find love early and easily. Others wait longer, search harder, and sometimes wonder if they're meant to walk through life alone. But Michelle's story proved that the best love stories aren't always the quickest ones. Sometimes they're the ones that teach us the most about ourselves, that challenge us to grow into the people we're meant to become, that show us that the very things that make us different might just be the things that make us extraordinary. Because in the end, love isn't about finding someone who wants you despite your flaws. It's about finding someone who sees your flaws as part of what makes you irreplaceably, perfectly you. And sometimes, if you're very patient and very brave, that someone might just be worth waiting your whole life to find. The end. Your participation means a lot to the channel. Please share your thoughts in the comments. A question for you. Would you have made the same choice as Michelle? Would you have waited for real love, even when everyone around you was settling for less? What would you have done in her place? Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.